Good evening. Tonight you're going to learn how to solve equations using multiplication and division. Let's talk about some key ideas before we get started. So like we talked about yesterday, we talked about the addition property of equality and the subtraction property of equality, which said pretty much what you do to one side you have to do to the other. This goes the same with multiplication and division. So the multiplication property of equality says when you multiply each side of an equation by the same non-zero number, the two sides remain equal. So for example, if I start off with 5 equals 5, that's a true statement. As long as I multiply both sides, so multiply the left side by 2 and the right side by 2, I'm going to still have an equation. It looks a little different. Okay, now it says 10 equals 10, but it's still an equation. They are still equal to each other. Okay, let's quickly talk about the division property, and then we'll come right back up to the inverse. Division property says, well, when you divide each side of the equation by the same non-zero number, the two sides remain equal. So if I start with 10 equals 10, and I divide both sides by the same number, so let's say we're going to divide them both by 2, now I get 5 equals 5. So once again, the equality remains true. So they are still equal to each other. 5 equals 5. Okay, let's take a moment to talk about the multiplicative inverse because this gets a little confusing. This says the product of a non-zero number n, so any number n, and its reciprocal, which is 1 over n, is 1. So let's just write down some examples of some inverses of each other. So if I have 2, 2's inverse is 1 over 2. All it is it's really just flipped. Okay, so let's say I have 3 over 4. 3 over 4's inverse is just it flipped, which is 4 over 3. Let's do one more example. If I have 1/3, 1/3's inverse is just 3 over 1. Okay? If you notice, if you look at these, all of the diagonals are the same. So here's 3 and 3, and 4 and 4, and 1 and 1, and 3 and 3. So when I go to multiply these problems, so let's go to multiply them. So if I have 2 over 1 times 1 over 2, you remember anything from our fraction unit, I can cross cancel 2 and 2 and 1 and 1, and my answer is 1. So that's what the multiplicative inverse property says. Well, when I take a number and I multiply it by its reciprocal, I'm always going to get 1. So let's do our 3 over 4 times 4 over 3. Using our cross canceling, 3's cancel, 4's cancel, I get 1. Okay. So now let's move on to solving some equations. Our inverse operations in today's lesson are multiplication and division. So that means when I'm multiplying, to undo multiplication, I can divide. When I'm dividing, if I want to undo division, I multiply. Just like addition and subtraction went hand in hand, multiplication and division is the same way. So when I'm looking at our problem, first thing we need to do is draw our bridge or our line separating the two sides. And the next thing, we need to find our variable. Where is our variable? He's right here. And then we say, okay, well, what's happening to W right now? Well, if you were to say the problem out loud, this is W divided by 4 equals 12. Well, if I'm dividing by 4, remember our inverse operation is multiplication. I need to multiply by 4. Okay? So I'm dividing right now. Okay? So to undo, multiply. Okay, so that's what's happening. I'm dividing, so I'm going to multiply to undo it. So now if I multiply both sides by 4, Okay. Now I have 4 over 1 times w over 4. Well, what happens here is my two 4's get canceled, and I'm just left with w. So now I have my w equals, and then I just have to do 12 times 4, which is 48. And then once again, if we plug it in to do our check, I'm going to check and I say, okay, well, is 48 divided by 4 equal to 12? Well, yes it is. So I got that right. So let's look at B now. And this tends to be the trickiest one. 2/7 x equals 6. Well, this guy is a fraction. So we're going to say fraction. Okay, so is that a fraction? Yes, it is. Multiply by reciprocal. Okay, so since he's a fraction, right here out in front of your x, I want to multiply by my reciprocal. Well, remember our reciprocal is just the flipped fraction of 2/7. So if I'm going to multiply by my reciprocal, it's 7 over 2. Is that flipped? Okay, so same thing over here. I'm going to make him a fraction though, so this is less confusing. So then I have 7 over 2. And then now we're going to look at it and say, okay, well, can I cancel? And I forgot one thing. I forgot to draw our line there. Can I cancel anything? Well, yeah. The purpose of it was to get rid of this 2/7. So 7 cancels and 2 cancels. So once again, we are left with our x, which is what we wanted. So x equals. Well, now we're going to look over here and say, okay, well, what can I cross cancel? 2 goes into 6 3 times. So I have 3 left, and I have 7 left. So my answer is 21. Okay, and then to check it, it's a little bit more tricky, but I have 2/7 times 21 equals 6. Well, I do want you to go through this work because some of us can't do that in our head. So 7 goes into 21 3 times. Well, 2 times 3 is 6, and 6 equals 6. So it checks out. Okay? Especially on these fraction ones where we have a tendency to make some mistakes. Really go back and check those answers. Okay, so let's look at C. What's happening here? This says 5 times B equals 65. Well, let's draw our line. We're going to find where our B is. We're going to ask ourselves, well, what's happening to B? Well, we said 5 times B. So I'm multiplying. So multiplying, that's what we're doing. To undo, we're going to divide. So because I'm multiplying, to undo that, I have to divide. So let's go through those steps. Because I'm multiplying by 5, I need to divide by 5. So if I put this over 5, that means 5b divided by 5. And then I have to do the same thing over here. 5b divided by 5. Well, 5 divided by 5, well, that's just 1, so that goes away. And I have my b left. Okay, and then we need to do 65 divided by 5. Well, if I do that, I get 13. And then to check my answer, all I have to do is 5 times 13 equals 65. If you need to, plug that into a calculator, or you know that 5 times 12 is 60, so 5 times 13 must be 65, and our answer checks out. Okay, for D, I have my t here. I'm going to draw my line. T divided by 6. So to undo that, I'm going to multiply both sides by 6. My 6's cancel out. So I have t equals 54. To check it, 54 divided by 6 does equal 9, so it works. Okay, moving on to E. Draw my line. Okay, I have a fraction here, which means reciprocal. Okay, so here's my x, The reciprocal of 3/4 is 4/3. So remember, we're going to make our 9 a fraction over here. Multiply that by 4/3 as well, because what I do to one side, I have to do to the other. I'm going to start canceling things. So 3's cancel, 4's cancel. I'm left with x. On this side, 3 goes into 9 3 times. So 3 times 4 is 12. Okay, and go ahead and do the check on that one on yourself and see how you do. Okay, let's look at F. I am going to draw my line. And you have to divide both sides because I'm multiplying right now. So to undo that, I have to divide by 7. So I have to divide this side by 7. Canceling. I get C is equal to 42 divided by 7 is 6. I plug it back in. 7 times 6 is indeed 42, so it works. We're going to do one more of these. Once again, this is a fraction, so you need to think reciprocal. So the reciprocal of 2/3 is 3/2, so multiply both sides. Put 8/1 by 3/2. Okay, and now I start cross-canceling, so 3's go away, 2's go away. I'm left with my x. Again, draw our line. So I have x equals 2 goes into 8 4 times. I have a 4 and a 3, so I'm left with 12. So plug that in, check your answer, make sure it works out. Okay, go ahead on your own, solve those 3, make sure you check them, make sure you show your work, and then come back. Okay, real life application. The area of the parallelogram shaped courtyard is 2,730 square feet. What is the length of the sidewalk? Well, it gives me the base. The sidewalk represents our height, and it gives us the area. So we need to go to our handy dandy formula that we've already learned, which is area equals base times height. Okay, because it wants us to talk about the area here. So, well, I know the area, which is 2,730 square feet. I'm going to plug that in there. I know the base, which is 65 feet. What I don't know is the height, because that is my sidewalk. So that's the equation you need to set up. Go ahead and solve it, and we'll go over that when you come in here tomorrow. Let's look at B. A driver travels 2,500 miles at a rate of 500 miles per day. Write and solve an equation to find the number of days it takes to complete the trip. Well, I know that I traveled 2,500 miles and 500 miles per day. So I don't know the days. So X has to be the days. Well, if I'm going 500 per day, I don't know how many days, I can just do 500 times the number of days I traveled, and that's going to get me to the 2,500 miles that I traveled. Okay, so 500 miles for every day I traveled. So for example, if I traveled 2 days, it would be 1,000 miles. That wouldn't work. Okay, so go ahead, solve this. See what you get, and we'll go over it tomorrow when you get into class. Okay, and then what I would like you to do is try number 4, write the equation, solve it, make sure you show all of your work for all of your on your own questions, and we will go over it tomorrow. Have a good night.